Hey guys, Madame Ram, starring Toni Collette, tells the dramatized true story of Georgia Frontier, a former entertainer turned owner and heavy hitter in the boys' club that is the NFL. After her husband's mysterious death, she shocks everyone by inheriting the LA Rams and taking the reins of a major sports franchise. Relying on her wit and astrological charts to make decisions, she turns the NFL on its head and to this day remains one of the most beloved, despised, and controversial figures in modern sports. You guys, I started listening to this and I am absolutely hooked. The twists and turns, I didn't see any of them coming, and I have so many questions. I cannot wait to continue to tune in. The woman who went from singer to NFL owner, defying expectations and shaking up the world of professional football. Madame Ram dives into her relentless quest for respect, power, and a championship trophy. This isn't your typical sports story. Follow Georgia Frontier as she navigates a male-dominated industry using star charts and sheer determination to make her mark in history. Whether you love football, powerful struggles, or just a good scandal, Madame Ram has it all. Ambition, mystery, and the unforgettable legacy of a woman who refused to stay on the sidelines. Madame Ram, the woman who took on a man's world and won. Follow Madame Ram on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.
What you've just heard is one of the many deaths from the monkey, the new major motion picture from Osgood Perkins, Stephen King, and James Wan. Experience it in theaters everywhere this Friday, because everybody dies, and that's life. Let's have some fun.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Big Mad True Crime, where we get big mad over true crime. I'm your host, Heather Ashley, and today you'll be hearing part 5 of the Jason Corbett case. Small talk sucks, so let's dive in. In the last 4 episodes, you heard a lot about the backstory, but today we're going back to the scene. Both Molly and Tom claim to have killed Jason in self-defense, so let's run through Tom's story and see if the scene backs him up. According to court documents, Tom claims that he woke up to thud noises upstairs, so he got up, grabbed his bat, then went upstairs to check it out. He followed the noise to Molly and Jason's room, where he claims to have found Jason standing in front of Molly with his hands around her neck. Tom says he told Jason to let her go, to which Jason repeatedly replied, "I'm going to kill her." After that, Tom claims that Jason took his hands off of Molly's throat, put her into a headlock, and started dragging her down a small hallway towards the bathroom. This hallway and bathroom was inside Jason and Molly's room. Thinking there was no way he could save his daughter if Jason got her into that bathroom, Tom claims to have followed behind them. It was on the way to the bathroom where he says he hit Jason with the bat for the first time, magically somehow missing Molly. Tom claims that hit seemed to do nothing but enrage Jason further, and at this point, Molly had reportedly stopped wiggling and had gone limp. If Molly was indeed unconscious, Jason would have presumably been holding up around 110, maybe 115 pounds of dead weight with just one arm. But let's keep going. After hitting Jason the first time, Tom says he followed them into the bathroom where he says he hit Jason in the head again. Jason then made his way out of the bathroom, now pushing Molly in front of him. If she was unconscious, that'd be one hell of a task. Nonetheless, as Jason and Molly were moving back towards the bedroom, Tom says he continued to hit Jason, still managing to miss Molly while in the chokehold. Somehow, Molly was able to break free and seems to have not been unconscious when she did, though a report from RTE says that at some point, Tom claimed Jason let her go, but regardless of whether she broke free or was released, Molly was not in a purported chokehold anymore at this exact point in time. At this point in Tom's story, Tom, Molly, and Jason are all free of one another, and Tom has the bat. But according to court documents, Tom says Jason took the bat from him, but instead of hitting Tom with it, Jason pushed him to the floor. Tom says he lost his glasses in this fall. Tom's on the floor now and claims that when he looked up, he saw Jason between him and his daughter, so he got up and rushed Jason to try and get the bat back. Following this, there was a supposed kind of wrestling match over the bat, and Tom has acted this out a few times. Each time, it seems that both he and Jason have both of their hands on the bat, and they're pushing, pulling, and tugging. Tom says he tried to hit Jason with the bat as they were fighting for it, like a jab here and a jab there, though it seems Jason never did the same since Tom walked away unscathed. While all of this was going on, court documents state that Molly reportedly yelled, "Don't hurt my dad." According to court documents, mustering all of Tom's elder Herculean strength, he claims he was able to get the bat back and proceeded to hit Jason with it over and over until he went down. That detail is very, very important. Once Jason was down, Tom claims to have stepped away, and after gathering his thoughts, he says he called police, and that's where we're at. No one seems to know when Molly joined in with the paver. We just know that it definitely did happen.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Knowing Tom's story, one, you would assume this was a very large room with a lot of free space to move around, and two, you'd assume this room was in complete disarray, but you would be wrong. Jason and Molly had a fairly large bedroom, but it was filled to the brim with furniture. When you walk through the door, you immediately see their large wooden bed with two end tables on either side. In front of that bed, there's a long dresser with a tall, skinny dresser beside that one. As far as free space goes, you'd have a little room to move around between the door and the end table against the far wall, and a small little path between the foot of the bed and the dressers in front of it, but that's kind of it. There's also a small hallway to the right that leads to the master bathroom, but it is a small hallway. Very small. Everything that happened in Tom's story had to have taken place in the little room between the door and the nightstand, in the walkway between the dresser and the bed, and in that hallway to the bathroom, and then, of course, the bathroom itself. For Tom's version of events to be true, it seems he would have had to have opened the door and immediately been feet away from Jason and Molly as Jason was choking his daughter. Jason had to have seen the bat and then, I guess, proceeded to threaten to kill Molly in front of Tom. Nevertheless, Tom did not immediately hit Jason. He claims to have told him to stop multiple times. Jason then had the time and space to whip Molly around into a chokehold and then move right towards that narrow hallway. We're talking mere feet here. That hallway is very narrow, but somehow Tom was able to swing a bat in it, make contact with Jason's head, and never injure Molly in the process. You'd have a hard time moving a box down this hallway and not hitting walls, but there was only one small dent that I could see in the crime scene photos. Maybe there were more dents that I have not seen in photos that have not been shared, But as far as the crime scene goes, this hallway didn't have nearly as much evidence to process as the rest of the room. So there was that dent, but the dent seems to have had blood around it, like a lot of blood. If this came from the bat, at what point did the bat get bloody? Because he said he first hit Jason in that hallway and that it only served to make him more mad. Someone was clearly bleeding pretty bad in that hallway, so either the blood got on the wall before making it to the bathroom or after. That's literally the only options. Either way, it is clear that Jason sustained very serious injuries either getting to the bathroom, while he was in the bathroom, or when he was leaving it. Blood drops on the carpet bolster that argument. There are blood smears on both the left and right sides of the hallway walls, almost like someone was trying to hold themselves up, and the only person bleeding was Jason. If he smeared both sides of the wall, you'd assume the smears probably came from his hands, but in Tom's story, one of Jason's hands was attached to the arm being used for that chokehold. I suppose it's possible he smeared one wall going to the bathroom and the other wall coming out of it, but if that's the case, it seems Jason would have had to have been bleeding before he entered that hallway. Either way, in my opinion, it doesn't seem like Tom's story fits. Tom's story continues from the hallway and into the bathroom, but the damage in the bathroom is fairly minimal. According to the journal, there was a dent in the wall near the light switch itself was cracked, and there was blood on it like something bloody had touched it. Again, the only person we know of that bled that night was Jason, so he'd clearly sustained an injury at this point. But why, after being hit in the head with a bat and reportedly still holding his limp wife in a chokehold, was Jason touching or coming into contact with a light switch? And why, if Tom was hitting Jason in the head, was the bat going towards said switch? Light switches are generally at about chest or shoulder height, but Tom was aiming carefully at Jason's head, right? To avoid injuring his daughter, right? I haven't seen this particular photo, so I cannot attest to what it looks like touched the light switch, just that it appears to be a transfer stain. It is certainly possible that it was a transfer stain from maybe Jason's head or even his shoulder that the blood could have maybe dripped onto, or maybe even the bat. Either way, it's peculiar. After the bathroom, Tom claims Jason was still holding Molly and proceeded to push her in front of him back through the hallway and into the main bedroom. Once in the bedroom, she was either freed or broke free. It seems the only place that could have happened would be in the space between the hallway and the bed and the space between the end table and the door. Very small, little rectangle type area. At that point, Molly could have either run for the door or maybe to the other side of the bed, but we know she didn't run for the door, and frankly, we just don't know where she went after that. All we do know is that she stayed in the bedroom and at some point grabbed the paver from her nightstand and hit Jason with it. With all of them independent from one another and back in the bedroom, Tom claims that Jason got a hold of the bat and pushed him to the floor where he lost his glasses. Surely that would have caused a thump or two, as would the bats to the walls, but none of that seemed to wake up Sharon, who was still asleep downstairs when police got there. While Tom was reportedly on the ground, Jason swung the bat at no one. In no rendition of any of their stories have I ever heard either one of them say that Jason used Tom's weapon as his own. Tom miraculously recovers from his fall, then bum rushes Jason in an attempt to allegedly keep him from hurting Molly and to get that bat back. I'm not sure where this tackle would have taken place though, because again, there is very little open space in this room. This probably also would have caused a thud or two, but alas, Sharon is still presumably asleep. Tom and Jason then get into a tug of war for the bat, with Tom jabbing Jason with it at every chance, but somehow this 6-foot-tall, 262-pound guy never, not once, jabbed Tom with it. In Tom's interview and other statements, he seems to suggest that Jason is this big, burly guy who practices boxing in his basement, but even still, Tom was never injured and he was able to win this tug of war for that bat. After regaining control of the weapon, Tom says he hit Jason with it an unknown number of times until Jason went down. So let's see what the blood says. When I first heard that Molly got away, Tom was pushed, and he had to essentially tackle Jason to keep him from hurting anyone, I assumed Molly had gone towards the other side of the bed since we know she didn't leave the room. I expected to see most of the blood on the other side of the room, but that's not the case. The majority of the blood in the Corbett's room was on the right-hand wall between the bedroom door and the entry to that hallway, so just a few feet into that room on the right. There are 2 massive blood stains or transfers on that wall that are so saturated that they're smeared and dripping, almost like Jason's head wound was resting against the wall. There's also large concentrations of spatter around those transfer stains. Knowing Tom said he hit Jason until he went down, you'd expect most of the blood to be concentrated maybe 6 feet off the floor. But no. Those massive stains and the majority of the spatter on the wall is between ankle and thigh level. One of the large stains is lower than an outlet on the wall, and the other is just a tad bit higher, if that gives you any point of reference. There's actually a photo where a crime scene investigator is measuring the height of some of the spatter, and based on his measuring tape, it seems to kind of disperse a little more than 5 feet off the floor. And by that height, the spatter is a lot more spread out. Jason was 6 feet tall. I repeat, 6 feet tall. Point blank, period. You're going to have a hard time convincing me that Jason was only hit until he went down. I mean, there is a dent in the wall just above the baseboards. The baseboards that run along the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now boarding Group A. Please have your boarding passes ready to scan. If your phone is cracked, old, or was chewed up by your Chihuahua travel companion, please refrain from holding up the line. Instead, go to Verizon and trade in any phone in any condition from one of their top brands for the new Samsung Galaxy S25 Plus with Galaxy AI, and a watch and tab on any plan. Only on Verizon.
With new line on my plan. Service plan required for watch and tab. Additional terms apply. See Verizon.com for details.
Aside from the wall, there is some really strange blood evidence in this room, namely on the comforter on the bed and on the back of the bedroom door, as well as the door handle. Based on Tom's story, I don't even know when Jason would have had the opportunity to bleed on the bedspread at all. But that aside, at what point did Tom close the door? If you walk in and see your daughter getting strangled just feet in front of you, why would you close the only exit in that room? Why would you make it harder for your daughter to get out and for anyone to hear what's going on so they can call for help? Make it make sense. What's even more strange is that there's a vacuum sitting upright behind that bedroom door. The vacuum has a ton of blood on the canister, but it's dripping sideways. Based on that little detail, we can deduce that when the blood got onto the canister, it was laying on its side because gravity. Then, the blood had enough time to dry before it was sat back up. Now, I couldn't tell you who sat it back up because I don't think anyone has ever answered that question, but that brings into question the time that passed between impact and upright. I also want to bring up something that I haven't seen mentioned before anywhere, but will bother me until the end of all time. When I zoomed in on the photo of the vacuum, it looks like there's blood in or on that little window above the bristles. It's hard to tell whether it's on the outside or inside of the window, but being on the inside would be nuts. Certainly no one tried to vacuum up blood, right? Well, looking at the floor near the vacuum, the blood looks pinker and less pooled, and there appears to be pink streaks that lead to the base of the vacuum. In my personal opinion, only an opinion, I think that it looks like someone may have tried to vacuum up the blood. This is not a fact, it is an opinion based on observation, but oh my. Moving along, according to a search warrant, Tom told a detective that he and Jason had gotten into a Donnybrook. I had never heard of that term before, but apparently, Donnybrook is an Irish term for a riotous disorder or a heated argument. The fact that Tom used an Irish term to describe this fight is not a crime, but it certainly feels like one. Anywho, this detective went into that bedroom expecting to see the result of an uncontrolled fight, but that just was not the case. Yes, he saw blood everywhere, but the room itself wasn't in much disarray. In crime scene photos, you can see one picture frame on the floor underneath a lamp, but the lamp is clearly still plugged in because it's on. If any force knocked it off, it wasn't done with enough force to unplug it or render it unworkable. That's not a word, but bear with me. I don't know why a lamp, though, would have been turned on the dresser in front of the bed in the middle of the night if the only reason they were up is because Sarah had a nightmare. But that's where we are. The fallen frame underneath the lamp looks like it was probably one that sat on the same long dresser and appears to have been a photo from Jason and Molly's wedding, but the frame itself doesn't appear to be damaged or broken. Aside from those two items, I noticed nothing outside of the blood and dents in the walls that would have indicated that any kind of uncontrolled Donnybrook had taken place. The weapons used to kill Jason were photographed in the small space between Jason and Molly's bed and that long dresser. The bat was propped up against the dresser, and the cement paver was lying on the floor in front of it. With the way Molly seemed to kind of wonder if she'd hit Jason with it, I expected to see maybe a little bit of blood on the paver, but no. It was so bloody that it left a bloody print in the carpet. The paver also had pieces of hair on it that could be seen with the naked eye. With the sheer amount of blood and hair on that brick, I find it hard to believe that anyone would ever question whether or not it made contact with Jason's head. There is no question. Somehow everyone in that house managed to sleep through this purported, uncontrolled Donnybrook. We've talked about the sheer amount of blood in that room, but I think it's important that we discuss the damage that Tom and Molly inflicted to Jason's body. Jason's family runs a Facebook page called Jason's Journey, and they shared his autopsy report with everyone there. I had a hard time figuring out how to present all of his injuries because there's just so many, but I decided to go by category. Let's start with bruises or contusions. The list of bruises on Jason's body goes as follows. The front of his head from temple to temple, his right eye, the right side of his nose, the tip of his nose, and his right upper gums. He also had bruising to his right upper back, the back of his right hand, the back of his left hand, his top left forearm, his outer left thigh, his right shin, and his outer left knee. In summary, Jason was bruised everywhere. When it comes to abrasions, so think scratches, the list goes as follows. Jason had abrasions to the back right side of his head, the back left side of his head, along his front hairline, the right side of his eye, and the right side of his nose. He also had abrasions on the right side of his chest, his left shoulder, on the back of his right hand, and on his inner thigh. I'm no expert here, but when thinking about what could have left so many abrasions on Jason's body, the cement paver comes to mind. Next on the list of injuries are lacerations or cuts. Jason had a laceration so deep to the right side of his scalp that his scalp was tearing off. There was another laceration to the back of his scalp so bad that it was gaping open. On the left side of Jason's head, he had a 6 by 4 inch laceration that had other lacerations branching off from it. Let that sink in. Jason had a laceration that was so deep and wide that it was not only measured in length, but also in width, and it had other lacerations branching off of it. Beneath those lacerations were several fractures. Jason's nose was palpably broken, meaning you could see the fracture with your eyes and feel it with your hands. But that was the least of Jason's broken bones. He'd also suffered a hinge fracture, which means that one of his fractures spanned the entire length of his skull, creating a hinge. Essentially, his skull could have been separated into two pieces. But Jason's skull was in far more than two pieces. There were so many fractures that the word comminuted was used, which means reduced to minute particles or fragments. This was evident by the EMT's hand slipping into Jason's skull and the pieces of his skull falling off when he was being moved. According to court records, a forensic pathologist estimated at least 10 blunt force injuries to Jason's head, 2 of which had evidence of repeated blows, meaning he was hit in the same spot twice. According to the Irish Times, 8 of those blows would have rendered Jason unconscious, and 4 of them would have killed him. So we're supposed to believe that Jason was only hit until he went down? In the end, Jason's death was ruled a homicide, but no one was immediately charged. Hell, Jason's family didn't even know the extent of his injuries for a very long time. Think months. All they knew in the beginning was Molly's purported claim that she'd pushed Jason, he hit his head, and that's how he died. Obviously, that is not the case. The last couple of things I want to talk about when it comes to Jason's autopsy are his stomach contents and his toxicology. In Jason's stomach, the medical examiner found green vegetable matter. They had pizza that night and mojitos, but maybe the pizza had vegetables on it. Certainly, he wouldn't have eaten the mint in the mojito. Now, this might sound a little bit irrelevant, but when we're trying to narrow down when Jason could have died, it might not be. According to the National Institute of Health, if you can discern a person's stomach contents with the naked eye, it was likely ingested between 1 to 2 hours prior to their death. If Jason died right before Tom called 911, that would mean, it seems, that Jason was awakened eating around 1 or 2 a.m. So when did Jason go to sleep? Or did he? Tracy says that Jason did not sleep in the nude, he slept in pajamas, but Jason was found without clothes on. She wrote about that in her book, My Brother Jason. It's also interesting that his clothes, or lack thereof, seem to have been a topic of conversation at some point between Molly's friends, because I did find some comments online saying that Molly's friends had been told that Jason did sleep naked. Now, why would that ever come up? On top of that, we know that multiple people on scene reported dried or semi-coagulated blood when they got there, and that the blood on the vacuum had time to dry before being stood back up. Putting all of that together, in my opinion, it's sounding more and more like there may have been some time that passed between Jason's death and when 911 was called. But what do I know? Moving on to Jason's toxicology report, it's time to buckle up. Based on Tom's interview at the station, you might assume that Jason was belligerently drunk that night, since he'd been drinking all day, but you would be wrong. Jason's BAC was a whopping 0.02. That is the equivalent of 1 drink. That is 1/4 of the legal limit to drive. Jason was not drunk by any stretch of Tom or Molly's imaginations. That's not the most shocking part, though. The shocking part was the fucking trazodone found in his system. To be fair, it was a very small amount, but Jason had not been prescribed trazodone, at least not that I could find. You know who had, though? Molly. According to Evoke, she had gone to the doctor on July 30th, the Thursday before Jason's death. She was apparently complaining of foot pain and was prescribed 15 milligrams of trazodone, which she was reportedly supposed to take once a day before bed. We can only speculate how it got into Jason's system because none of us were there, but let that sit with you for a minute. Let it ruminate. Trazodone is listed as an antidepressant and a sedative. Jason was a 6-foot, more than 200-pound man who was beaten to death. Meanwhile, everyone else walked away. Jason was killed in the early morning hours of August 2nd, 2015, and Molly and Tom spent much of that day talking to detectives. Jack and Sarah had been taken to one of Molly's brother's homes, and she joined them there when she was finished giving her statement. Yes, they were in her care that same day. By 9:15 a.m. the following morning, the Irish Independent reports that Molly was down at the courthouse trying to make it permanent. Molly was filing for custody. Later that day, things had started moving really fast. Court documents state that a caseworker with the Department of Social Services showed up unannounced to Molly's brother's house. She was there to interview the kids, and Molly was not present. I have to include that to be fair, because these initial interviews are not going to make Jason look good. When asked about how he was feeling, Jason's 10-year-old son Jack told the DSS worker that a police officer told him his dad had died at 4:52 a.m. He noted that the time was stuck in his mind. Jack named his emotions as angry and upset. When asked what he knew about the incident, he said that Molly told him that his dad had gotten so angry that Grandpa had hit him with a bat and Mom hit him with a brick. Molly seemed to tell Jack the truth about the bat and the brick while reportedly telling Jason's family that he'd simply hit his head. In discussing Jason and Molly's relationship, Jack told DSS that his dad would get mad and cuss at Molly for no reason, like for something as small as leaving a light on. He went on to state, quote unquote, "He physically or verbally hurt my mom. He said it twice, almost like he messed it up the first time and wanted to say it right the second time. And those were big specific words for a 10-year-old boy." According to RTE, Jack gave examples saying he once woke up to a noise, went to his parents' room, and saw his dad punch Molly in the face. He also reported instances of pushing and a time where Jason grabbed Molly's phone. He said Jason and Molly had started fighting when he was 5 or 6, but that it had gotten worse over time and even worse the last few months. Lastly, Jack was asked if his dad drank often, and according to RTE, Jack said no. According to court records, when it was time to interview 8-year-old Sarah, she told DSS, and I quote, "Seemingly innocuous things set him off. A 7-year-old child, who was reportedly afraid of her bedsheets, said seemingly and innocuous in the same sentence." Just like Jack, she reported that her dad would get upset with her mom when lights were left on, adding that Jason was always the one who started it and that he would get really angry with Molly every day or most likely twice a day. Getting more specific, she said she'd seen her dad hit Molly once, pull her hair, point at her face, and call her a bad name. Though when asked if her dad would hurt his wife, RTE reports that Sarah said no. Sarah recalled a time when she was 6, so 2 years prior, when Molly reportedly told her, "Your dad isn't that good of a dad." Just like with Jack, the DSS worker asked Sarah about her dad's drinking, and according to RTE, she too said that he didn't drink much, just beer and only with friends or at parties. I think we're all feeling kind of icky at this point. I don't know what else to name it. If what the kids said is true, then Jason is the monster that Molly claims he is, but almost immediately, people started to wonder if the kids had been coached. Jack's verbally and physically comment and correction felt off, and Sarah's statement of seemingly innocuous things felt like really big words for an 8-year-old girl. And Sarah described witnessing some pretty terrible behavior by her father, but when simply asked if she thinks her dad would hurt his wife, she said no. Something didn't feel right. The following day, Molly filed another petition with the courts, but this time it wasn't just for custody. She wanted to adopt Sarah and Jack. Meanwhile, Jason's sister Tracy was doing everything she could to get from Ireland to North Carolina. You see, Jason had named Tracy and her husband Dave as the children's guardians if anything ever happened to him, not Molly. Molly certainly would have known that, and she was doing everything she could to make sure that she was the one that got these kids. When it comes to the petitions for the kids, it's kind of a mess. I've seen 2 thus far, but court documents note that on August 5th, Molly filed for emergency custody. In order to get emergency custody, you have to cite what the emergency is, and Molly's reason was that she was worried Tracy was coming to the U.S. so that she could take the kids back to Ireland. In essence, she was making it sound like Tracy was on some kind of international kidnapping mission. The emergency custody was granted. On August 6th, Sarah and Jack were given another interview by a place called Dragonfly House. The purpose of this interview was to determine Jack and Sarah's exposure to or experience of abuse in the home. And this is how it went. I've seen documents, and other news stations have covered this, like the Irish Independent, the Irish Mirror, so many incredible Irish reporters. According to the documents, Sarah told the interviewer that Jason had been drinking with neighbors during the day prior to his death. Her sweet little 8-year-old self said that her dad must have been thirsty because he kept having beers. At around 9 p.m., she says that her grandparents showed up and no one knew they were coming except for Molly. She remembered hanging out with them inside, then falling asleep on the couch. Someone, and I don't know who, must have taken her to bed. She said she must have been really, really sleepy that night because usually little noises wake her up, but she never woke up that night. But didn't Molly say that all of this started because Sarah had woken up from a nightmare? Moving on to Jack's interview, he stated that Molly told him Sarah had a nightmare about insects and birds. This 10-year-old did not say bugs, he said insects. I'd also like to note that I've now heard the nightmare was about insects, birds, lizards, and spiders, but Sarah said she hadn't woken up. Nevertheless, Jack reportedly went on to summarize that his dad got mad and started screaming at his mom, so his grandfather ran upstairs with a bat. Now, we heard that Tom woke up from thuds, but Jack seems to have been told that his grandfather woke up from hearing screams. Jack said his mom hit his dad with a cinder block and his grandfather hit his dad with a bat. In one document I came across, Jack reportedly stated, "And then my dad grabbed a hold of the bat, held the bat, and hit my grandpa with the bat until my mom we were going to paint a brick that was there like a cinder block, and it hit his temple right here and he died." Court documents state that Jack said the paver was brought inside because they were going to paint it and make it look pretty, but they didn't want it to get wet. But historical weather data shows that the last time it had rained was July 31st, and it didn't rain again until August 7th. Regardless of the rain, though, nothing explains why there was only 1 brick and 2 children. And if this was going to be a craft project, why was it being kept in Molly and Jason's bedroom? Sure, their room was on the first floor, but so was the kitchen and the living room and the garage. For whatever reason, it seems Molly felt like the best place for that paver was her bedside table. Jack recalled playing sports with his dad, playing fantasy football together, and having fun at school and parties with him. As for Molly, Jack said she takes him to McDonald's and sports, and that she helps him get smarter. The boy who said physically, verbally, and in sex really appreciated how Molly helped him get smarter. While some documents state that there was no evidence of coaching, many people had very serious doubts, and maybe for good reason. Because 9 months later, the children recanted their statements and gave an explanation. According to court documents, Jack told the district attorney that he didn't tell the truth because Molly had coerced him into lying by telling them that if they didn't, Tracy and her husband would get custody of them and take them away, and they would never see Molly again. The only parent that these young children had left, and the one who had just killed their dad. Jack told the courts that he wanted to tell the truth now because he had learned more details about what happened to his father, and he wanted justice to be served. A lot happened in the 9 months between when the kids made their initial statements and when they recanted. Tracy landed in the U.S. the day after their second interview, and according to her book, My Brother Jason, she was met at the airport by the Irish consul and taken straight to the sheriff's office. It was only then that she learned her brother had not died from a fall. It was also the first time she had learned that Tom was involved in any of this whatsoever. As you can imagine, Tracy wasted approximately 0.0 seconds hiring an attorney and filing for custody of Jack and Sarah, and then headed over to Molly's brother's house to see her niece and nephew. But before she even made it to the door, Tracy says that someone called police. Everything that happened next, however, is going to have to wait until next week. For photos pertaining to this case, check out Jason's highlight at the top of my Instagram profile at @TheHeatherAshley, and join me there today at noon Eastern, where you go live with me and we talk about today's case and all other true crime cases on your mind. To get access to ad-free and bonus episodes, subscribe to our Apple Premium or head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/BigMadTrueCrime, where for just $2 whole a month, your episodes are totally ad-free. If you love the podcast, feel free to leave a review. It makes my day every single time. And if you have a case you'd like to hear covered, share it with Big Mad True Crime on social media, because all cases are covered by listener request. I'll be bringing you Jason's case next week, and I cannot wait. But until then, we out. All right, we're at the end of this episode, and that's usually where I thank one of you beautiful gems for being nice for no reason and leaving a good review, but I literally left my phone outside. Who does that? It's been like an hour of recording, and I left my phone outside. So if you left a good review in the last week, I love you so much. I'm so sorry that I cannot look at any of the screenshots he has sent me. Fail on my part, but I'll make it up to you in the hot take. So I'm just going to transition. This is the hot take now. I'm at a loss for words when it comes to the hot take. What I think I'm going to do right now is actually go through the crime scene photos. They're online. You can find them pretty much anywhere. If you Google Jason Corbett crime scene photos, they are everywhere. Just a fair warning, they are very graphic. Obviously, Jason is not in them. There's one I have seen that does photograph his foot uncovered. I believe he's on a stretcher in the ambulance. But none of the crime scene photos have him in it. One of the best places to find them is this Reddit thing. I don't know, it's a Reddit post that has all of them in there, but I mean, they're on the Irish everything. All these Irish reporters, I mean, everywhere. It's everywhere. You can look it up if you want to. Fair warning, it's really graphic. So I'm going to go in order of these photos because there's no way I could fit everything into the first description. Anywho, I'm babbling. Looking at the first photo on here, it's like the front of the longer dresser. It's a wooden dresser. The bat is propped up against it, and the brick is on the floor. Okay, so the brick is on the floor, and the lamp and picture frame that are on the floor are piled on top of each other in the tiny little space between the door frame and where the dresser starts. I don't know how they would have gotten knocked off and been on top of each other. I actually talked to Kyle about this because that seems unlikely. They would have had to have fallen either at the exact same time underneath each other or at two different times. Either way, Why is the lamp on in the middle of the night when Jason was purportedly very upset for being woken up? That doesn't really make a ton of sense. Who turned the lamp on? They would have had to get out of the bed, go to the dresser in front of the bed, and turn that light on for some kind of purpose. And I can't figure out what that purpose would have been, but obviously I don't know the details of everything that happened that night. Only the people there do. Nonetheless, the lamp is still on and shining bright while on top of this picture frame. On top of the dresser is a Food Lion MVP card, a pair of glasses, a plastic clip for your hair, some kind of jewelry box looking thing. There's a piece of paper on the floor. I'm not sure what it is. It could be unrelated. You can see the cord for the vacuum. The cord for the vacuum sprawled across the floor in the corner. Tell me why the cord is not curled up and intact, like on the vacuum. Like when you're done vacuuming, you wrap the cord on the little place for the vacuum and then you clip it a little bit, that little clippy piece on the back of the plug, and that's where it is. Tell me why the cord is out. If no one used the vacuum, tell me why the cord was out. I need someone to convince me that the vacuum was not used. Or the next photo I'm looking at is a photo that is where the blood is really concentrated on that right wall. So if you open the door is going to hit the wall. So it probably has one of those like little dingy things that makes funny noises when it gets tapped. There's a little doorbell. I think it's like the Ring chime. There's something plugged into the outlet, and there's blood all over it. To the left of that, below, is a shit ton of blood. Just transfer, smeared, dripping blood. And a little bit to the left of that, this has got to be like 2 to 3 feet only, is a higher kind of transfer, smear, collection of blood. It's massive and dripping. There's a really concentrated area of spatter kind of upwards a little bit and to the right above the outlet. Everything there with the spatter, it seems to be really concentrated and then spanning outward. It gets thinner as it goes up. There's a picture frame above it. Probably, we can reference the photo where the guy is holding up the picture frame. Not the picture frame, the measuring tape. The measuring tape at about like 5 feet is probably about where this picture is hung on the wall. There's hardly any spatter by the time you get up to that picture frame. So when I tell you that the blood is concentrated on the bottom half of the wall, I could not stress that enough. Any of you who are going to go Google this will know exactly what I'm talking about. So part of the furthest left transfer dripping smear of blood, it actually goes onto the door frame that leads into the hallway. The hallway doesn't have a door, but it does have a frame around it. And above that almost looks like bloody hands. Like somebody tried to grab onto the wall, hold themselves up. I'm not totally sure. Maybe it could be explained some other way. Do not know. But spatter also spans from across the hallway opening onto the other wall. So blood was flying so fast that it went past the hallway and onto the other wall. You can see in this photo blood smears on the left hand of the wall. It looks like there's probably a closet on the left side of the wall too. And at this point, the door is open in this photo. You can also see the bedroom door is open in this photo. I don't see blood on the outside of the door. So coming into Jason and Molly's room, I don't see any blood on that door because I think it was closed. All right, the next photo I'm looking at is a photo of the hallway. There is a shit ton of spatter kind of on the door frame on the left side. There's also smears on the left side and the right side. There are drops of blood that seem like they might be going vertical, just down onto the floor, but it's not a ton. There is some. However, right before you get to the bathroom where the carpet turns into tile, you see these 2 kind of pink smears of blood where I don't know if somebody had to have walked over it or something like that. It's not pooled like you see in other places of the room, kind of below the massive spots on that right wall when you walk into the bedroom. The blood on the floor in front of the bathroom looks like it's thinner. It's not pooled. It looks smeared and more of a pink color. You can also see what I think might be a dent on this wall because there's a centerpiece that does not look like it has blood on it, but everything else around it does look like it has blood on it. Oh, this photo is the fucking vacuum. When I tell you that there is blood all over the canister of this vacuum, all over it, and it's striped. The blood is striped because it had to have been on its side when the blood got on it, and then it rolled down. Behind this vacuum, there is plenty of blood. There's actually this one part that looks like a lot of blood must have like slung onto the wall. It's a much bigger spot than the rest of the spatter, and then it has its own drip running from it. If the vacuum was where it is now, you would assume there would be kind of a blank space behind the vacuum, or it protected the wall from being hit with the spatter, but I don't see that happening. I'm also looking at the window into the bristles, and I shit you not, kind of on the left side of it when you're looking at it, it looks like there's red on it. Maybe I'm fucking nuts. I don't think I am. But when you see this photo, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about with the carpet. When you run over like, oh my gosh, you guys have probably seen these like TikTok ads where it's like, look, this little Swiffer thing can pick up liquid and will vacuum. And they give you the bad example of like somebody spills pudding or something and they run over it with a regular vacuum. Like who would fucking do that anyways? Anyway, but it's like line smears from the bristles going over it on the floor. That is what a lot of this blood looks like. Now, we could try and explain that away by saying, oh, maybe when the door was opened over the pools of blood, it made that kind of streaking. But no, it does not follow the path of the door. And it's also not the only place where those streaks seem to be. It's like this little area where there's like, it almost looks like Jason's blood would have dripped kind of in an arch, and then there's a ton of spatter on the floor. And that is a lot pinker than every other bit of blood. It looks like it has been smeared somehow. But then leading up to the bottom of the vacuum is smears of blood in the carpet. I do not know how I haven't heard anyone bring this up before. It has bothered me since I've seen it. Also in this photo, you can see the back of the door, and it does appear to have a handprint on it. And you can see some reddish pinkish color on the door handle. So you have to wonder if Jason tried to get out, because who else's blood would this have been? I don't know whose handprint that is. Maybe if any of them had blood on their hands, which we really didn't see much of in the crime scene photos of them, maybe it was from them. But this handprint, it's on the door near the door handle. So many questions. All right, the next photo I'm looking at is another angle that shows the lamp and the picture frame. It does look like maybe there's something else under there. I couldn't tell you what it is. Maybe like a purse? I don't know what that is. Looks like there's actually some spatter on the lamp shade. There's also tiny bits of blood spatter on the carpet in comparison to everything else in this room. But this photo actually kind of gives you an insight into how little space there was in this room to move around, because you can see the end of the bed frame as well as the front of this long dresser. The next photo we have here is the crime scene tech using the measuring tape to presumably figure out the height of the spatter on the wall. There's a dent on the wall as well where it looks like the drywall is coming up. It is measuring about, the dent on the wall is about 5 feet up. The spatter continues to go up a little bit, but most of it just like it disperses the higher it goes. Most of this blood is concentrated on the bottom half of the wall. The next photo we have here is of the bedspread. I cannot explain, based on Tom's story, how and why there would have been blood on this bedspread. This almost appears like he was sitting or standing on or over the bed, because some of these are just circles, or it's like multiple drops dropped kind of in a way that they could touch each other. There are a couple that do have tails, but then there's one spot kind of towards the upper right-hand side of this photo where it's a lot of small spatter put together. It almost looks like aspirated. Oh gosh, think Michael Peterson case. I do believe this came up in the Michael Peterson case where there was like an aspiration of blood spatter on the staircase at some point, and they talked a lot bit about that, but that had blood spatter issues with the testimony. Nonetheless, it is very close together. Based on this story, if this was just coming from cast off from the bat or anything like that, you would expect them to all kind of be similar. But they're kind of not. But they also follow like a little bit of a line, like a pattern, coming from the left, going up and going towards the right, and then almost seemingly going vertical. I can't make sense of this. And we'll also hear about blood that was reportedly on the bed skirt as well, that kind of saturated. Let me figure out who reported on that. This actually comes from Tracy's book, My Brother Jason, but she says that there were impact spatters in the bedding and then saturation on the skirting of the bedding. And so how would that happen? Saturation has to come from a lot of blood pooling in one area. I tried to find a photo of this, and I think I do know what she's talking about. I saw a photo that did include the skirting. It's kind of loose and dangling a bit and bunched up in like some areas. Nonetheless, there is a spot of color at the bottom that I think is what she's talking about. And when looking at the directionality of the blood, I can't make it make sense if Tom is telling the truth. So, yeah. Looking at a photo of the paver, there's just obvious hair and blood all over it. There is no question that made serious contact with Jason's head. I'm looking at the bat. It's really hard to tell about evidence on the bat because the bat itself is black, but it does have a red TPX on it. It's from Louisville Slugger. I will lose sleep over the date of this bat forever and ever. But yeah, that is everything that I have as far as crime scene photos. There's some more out there in places, but this really covers pretty much everything. I don't see much of anything when it comes to blood evidence in the area between the bed and the dresser. So if anybody ran over there or any kind of altercation happened there, I don't know. There is a spot on the carpet a little bit further down, maybe past the bed, but I don't know what it is. I couldn't tell you. Yeah, I don't buy the story, but you guys should. If this is something you can stomach and that you want to look into, look it up. It's everywhere. Tracy talks about it in her book. So I do feel comfortable saying like, hey, if you want to look at this, you should definitely check it out. So next week, we will go into what happened in the 9 months following and maybe a little bit more. A lot happened. You think you're big mad now. This case is going to break your heart a million times. I wish it was different, but it's not. But we're going to cover this case completely. I love you guys. And thank you so much, everybody who has bought Tracy's book, everybody who has done their own research, everybody who has just openly given so many fucks. You're amazing people. You're what make the true crime community amazing. And I love knowing you. So I'll talk to you soon, Kayla.